Now, the United States Supreme Court been in the news. We've talked about this week, the Supreme Court taking up the idea of gerrymandering, and there'll be much to say about that in the months ahead and ahead of a decision whenever that would come down the pike. They also struck down, this was interesting, unanimously, a North Carolina law, one that bars the use of social networking sites commercially, including Facebook, by registered sex offenders. A lower court had upheld the law, but lawyers for a registered sex offender said, you know what, this law is too broad, and it includes my client, even though his Facebook posting concerned the fact that his parking ticket had been dismissed. No fine, no court costs, nothing spent. Praise be to God. Well, so how far can you go with something like that? The High Court says you've gone too far. Let's talk about this morning with Dr. Katherine Brown. She's a specialist in crimes committed against children and assistant professor in the School of Criminology at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas. Dr. Brown, good morning.
Good morning.
Did the Supreme Court do the right thing here or the wrong thing? Was the North Carolina law, in your mind, too broad, and that was its problem? It needs to be more narrowly targeted? What do you think?
Well, I think that the Supreme Court made the right decision in this case because the law was overly broad. Now, keep in mind, the Supreme Court has ruled, as you know, from the Ashcroft decision, that yes, you can make laws that protect children. Mm-hmm. But in this particular case, the Supreme Court said, you know, you've gone too far. But they also kind of gave some hints within the opinion to states so that they can enact legislation in this area. But in this particular law, it banned offenders from pretty much most social media or websites. And they said that's just an unfair infringement on their First Amendment free speech.
So they drew the line and said, North Carolina, here's the line. You're way over on this side of it. We're going to rule against. But they didn't. But in doing so, do you think, as you just said, they've kind of given the framework for where states should go from this point forward?
Absolutely. In fact, they specifically made a statement that they were not banning all laws on this topic. This particular one was just too broad.
How serious a problem is this these days? I mean, we all know the prevalence of social media and the new platforms that pop up. I mean, you know, Facebook is now, I'm told, for people in my age range, young people won't go near with a 10-foot pole. They're on Snapchat. And now some are morphing off that because there's too many older people. And, well, that also brings in the possibility for predators, too, does it not?
Right.
When the usage goes up, and it's not just people who are, you know, 13, 14, 15 anymore. So what about the lay of the land in social media from your standpoint as an expert?
Well, look, predators are always going to use the tools available to them to find victims. That hasn't changed and won't change, even as technology does. What we have to realize is that the reality is the recidivism rate for sex offenders is much lower than any other type of offender. And studies actually show that one problem that does increase sex offender recidivism is social isolation, which very many are once they're placed on that sex offender registry. And that really limiting social interactions online can increase their recidivism risk. Now, I do think we have to protect children, and I do think that that's really up to parents and adults and people policing the communities to watch out for predators. But I think in some cases, sex offender registry laws and some of these laws are knee-jerk reactions to guard against this problem that make us feel safe but really aren't helping make children safer.
Do you think it, okay, but for example, here in Michigan where, you know, you can look at a map basically and see where convicted sex offenders are who are not incarcerated, is that a good tool for parents, for law enforcement, others to have, or is that not a good tool?
You know, I think it's merely a tool, and I'm not sure labeling it good or bad is adequate here. I think it gives us an overblown sense of safety, feeling that we know where these sex offenders live. But let's face it, sex offenders, yes, you might know where they live. You don't know where they go to the grocery store. You don't know where they hang out, where they work. So again, you can't rely on that list or sex offenders keeping the law enforcement apprised when they move for your sense of safety. So it is merely a tool. And, a lot of victims groups, even nowadays, are saying we really do need to re-examine the sex offender registry laws in the United States.
It's interesting, and where you fall on this issue here, and that it's not unanimous out there, even among those who do this for a living. And you're a criminologist, and you specialize in crimes against kids as your expertise. Dr. Katherine Brown, our guest. What's the best place for people to go to get information on this if they want to look online and become better educated on the topic? Where would you say?
Well, all states have websites that have listings for the sex offender registry laws. There are apps, so you can certainly download them. I'm not advocating that you do not do that, but don't rely on that completely. Parents need to make sure that they know what their children are doing on social media, and even older teens need to talk to them about this topic.
Dr. Katherine Brown, our guest, and in Michigan, it's michigan.gov, the state police, that's /MSP. You go on the sex offender registry and get more information about it there. Dr. Brown, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Morning Wake Up continues, 1320 WILS.